Thank you all so much. What a wonderful introduction, which really got to a lot of what I need to talk about here. As you can see, we're talking about name tags. We've all worn name tags, but what we're talking about are not the name tags that we wear that have our name, but the way we look, how old we are, what gender we are. Some of those name tags that can be limiting. Obviously for me, in some ways, the wheelchair is that thing that you look at and go, well, it could well be limiting. Can we look beyond those? And that's going to be the idea of what we're doing. I'm going to need a little bit of your help as we move along, because we have a saying that we're going to go to throughout this whole thing. It's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you. So I'm going to need help from you guys. Can I get the people on the outside to say, it's not what happens to you, and then the people in the middle to refrain with, it's what you do with what happens to you. All right? You handle it? Yeah. Okay. So ready? 1, 2, 3.
It's not what happens to you. It's what you do with what happens to you.
Okay, you can definitely step up the energy as we move along, but it's a good start. Quick question, you guys. Anybody know what these people share in common? Pretty amazing list. 3, I'm going to take 3 hands. Anybody? Anybody? We have a half a hand over there. Anybody? Okay. Wow, this is good. You totally preempted me. Thank you. That's awesome. I was looking for, they're successful, they are, they're famous, they're rich, all of which is true. But the thing that this group shares together is that they all had some form of learning disability. So you look at that and you go, wow, this is pretty amazing. I mean, who would ever think that you'd look at Einstein and go, you're really not all that smart. But that's the way it went going through school for Einstein, was that he really wasn't seen as being all that smart. He wasn't very good at math, which is kind of amazing. You all recognize Michael Phelps, right? Sort of an interesting picture, right? The reason I put this picture in there is for exactly that reaction. Michael Phelps looks like he was born in the water, but when he comes out of the water, sometimes he doesn't really look like he's born to be on land. I didn't think that was that funny, but that's good. Anyway, but look at it. Michael Phelps got picked on for the way he looked as a kid. These big hands and big feet. He kind of looks like a German Shepherd puppy who hasn't grown into his paws yet. His long, skinny torso. Think about this. Michael Phelps got picked on and he got bullied for exactly the things that made him the greatest Olympian ever. 8 gold medals in Beijing. So you're definitely at a time in your life where you're getting picked on, you're picking on other people. How about if you transport yourself down years ahead to think about, what about if somebody like Michael Phelps is the guy that I was picking on? Think he'd want to take your phone call now? Probably not. You're like, yeah, you're the guy who's bullying me. Yeah, no, you're not coming to that party with me. Not happening. But you look at that and you look at a guy like Michael Phelps, can we see beyond that label? To be like, oh, that guy's a dork. Or whatever. And it's like, that guy's one of the coolest guys going. Now. That said, you got, okay, totally ramp it up at this point, right? You've got to make these guys work harder. Ready? So 1, 2, 3.
It's not what happens to you. It's what you do with what happens to you.
Cool. And the reason why we keep doing this over and over is it sounds really easy as we're sitting here talking about it right now. But when it gets difficult, when something happens, that's when we need to remember it. Because what's the thing that joins all of us? No matter who we are, there will be some challenge in our life. There will be some form of adversity, probably some form of tragedy. It all seems simple sometimes right now, but when that happens, it's not what happens to you. It's what you do with what happens to you. The reason I'm here, as Fanning said so well, is because I had a ski accident 22 years ago. First day of Christmas vacation, I was skiing on the team. I went home to my home mountain, skied with my brother, met up with a bunch of friends, people I'd grown up with. We took 3 warm-up runs beforehand. This is like the equivalent of a couple of laps around the soccer field. Wasn't going very fast. In the middle of a turn, my ski popped off. I fell in the middle of the trail. and broke 2 vertebrae, damaging the spinal cord. So in that moment, my life changed. And you look at some of the labels that I had beforehand, and these are the labels that I had. And you look at that, and I see why you're laughing, and we'll get to that, which is good. But the thing is, it's like, I was a ski racer. I was a student, but yeah, what you were laughing at is I was cool. How much of our time in school do we spend trying to fit in? Trying to be cool? The hard part about that is sometimes if we spend all our time trying to fit in, trying to be cool, we don't get a chance to figure out who we are. Because we spent all our efforts trying to fit in. But the qualities at that point, I was an athlete, so I could do whatever I wanted to do. I was fit. I was strong. You look at those people and go, okay, well, you're going to be successful. You can do whatever you want to do. Afterwards, my name tags were really more about being a victim. They were what happened to me. Obviously, I was still a student, but I was a paraplegic. That's a label. It was about the wheelchair. And the other part was, the thing that worried me the most was being uncool. That my accident, that the wheelchair could separate me from all of my friends. Separate me from the people that I really, wanted to be with. Okay, we're going to get to a little bit of this. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go back. Can I get, you were wondering what we were going to do with those cards, right? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is get the people who did not get a card. Can you guys stand up? Okay. Sit back down. Can I get the people with a green card to stand up too? Okay, sit back down. And then, did anybody get an X on their card? Those with an X, stand up. All right, sit back down. The reason why I had to do this is because, one, partially, a lot of the name tags that we have are at random. You got a card at random unless Fanning was giving you your favorite color, or you traded or something like that. And part of the reason you might trade is because you wanted to have the same card that your friend had, right? So if you look at this, there's this huge fear of the unknown. Why are you giving me this card? What are you going to do to me? Did you watch the people who stood up? There's a whole lot more nervousness with the people who didn't get a card. It's like, what's going on? Did you see what they did? They looked, and like, okay, well, at least I have a friend in this group. Isn't there that? There's that fear, because you're vulnerable. You're like, oh no, don't separate me. Don't separate me. So if there's one thing that we share, it's a sense of there will be a challenge, there will be a tragedy, but we all think that our thing is the biggest thing. That we're isolated. That you look at it and go, oh wow, my deal is the biggest deal out there. You ever feel that way? Where you're like, oh, everybody else has it so much easier than I do. After my accident, I was in the hospital, and all I wanted to do was get out of the hospital. Partially because people in the hospital are sick. I didn't want to be sick. I wanted to go back to school. And I wanted to go back for the spring semester, which would mean 2 months in the hospital, which is a long time, longer than you ever want to spend in the hospital. And I didn't know anything. So in that time, I went from being completely independent to completely dependent. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't get around. I couldn't dress myself. But I did whatever I could each day. I was learning just that little bit to try to move forward. And just as I thought I was about to leave, the head doctor called me into his office and he said, "You're not ready to leave." And I said, "Really, why not?" And he said, "Because you haven't been depressed." And I was like, wow, is that part of the program? Like, how long do I have to do it? I didn't really think that was part of what I needed to do. Can I do it for a half an hour? We can check that off. But for him, he was looking at the limitations. He was looking at what I had lost. And I should be depressed as a result of that. I was like, you know, I don't have time to be depressed. It was the most powerful I felt like I'd ever been in my life because I had to heal myself. And what I thought, my emotions, my actions were all leading to how I healed myself. And I was like, you know, I don't have time to be depressed. I want to get back to my life. But even people who came in and saw me in the hospital, they saw those same limitations. People said, you should get into computers. I was like, really? Why? Well, because you're going to be sitting down. I was like, really? I kind of thought I'd have a job that I was sitting down. I was not, you know, certainly not a Middlebury to go dig ditches for the rest of my life. You know, I really probably wasn't going to do that. But they saw the limitations. And you think, okay, well, that was a long time ago. 2 years ago, I came home from a long trip. Flew halfway across the world. I was in Tibet. I came home. I'd been gone for a while. My mailbox is at the end of my street. And I went to get my mail, and I stopped in my car, and I was putting my chair together, and this little girl rode by on her little pink bike. She's probably about 6 years old, has the streamers coming off the handlebars, and she said, what happened to your legs? Now, from the time we're little, we're taught not to stare at somebody who looks different, aren't we? It's impolite to stare. Problem is, if I didn't tell this girl a story, nobody else would. So as much as I did not feel like having a conversation with a 6-year-old, I told her exactly what I had told you, you know, especially after traveling halfway across the world. And I told her I had a skiing accident. And I said, you know those little bumps on your back, those are bones, and the nerves go through there, and that's where the message goes, and I broke those bones, and it damaged the spinal cord, so the nerves won't go. And she said, so you'll never walk again? And I said, no, probably not. And she rode away, and as she rode away, she said, that's too bad. And I wish that I had stopped her, because if I'd never had my accident, I never would have been the best in the world at anything. I was the best monoskier in the world. I wouldn't have met presidents and heads of state, the Dalai Lama. I wouldn't have, those people who said I should look at a change in job. Well, I did have a change in job. I was a professional athlete for 15 years after I graduated. I wouldn't have done that. So that little girl saw the tragedy, but she didn't see that potential gift.
She
Thank you. So when I first came up here, when I was first on stage, is that what you thought you'd see? Is that what you expected? No. And that's the idea with so much of what we're looking at is, can we look beyond what we think we see in somebody else? Can we look beyond Michael Phelps to see that guy who might be the greatest Olympian ever? Can we look beyond it with our friends? Can we look beyond those labels that limit both ourselves and other people? Okay, you ready? 1, 2, 3.
It's not what happens to you. It's what you do with what happens to you.
So think about that. For me, my name tags afterwards were world champion, athlete, superhero. This is, with some of my college friends, that's the status that they accorded me, was I could never do what you're doing. I liked a lot of those name tags. The hardest thing that I had to do was retire from sport. My identity was more tied to those name tags, to the world champion, athlete, and superhero, than it was to walking. It was more difficult for me to retire than it was for me to break my back, as far as my identity was concerned. So some of the things I had to look at were, how can I drop that mask? How can I achieve a level of honesty where that superhero thing, as much as I might like it, as much as that was self-preserving, because it was so exactly the opposite of being disabled, and people are like, wow, it doesn't even seem like you're disabled. I like that. But it prevented me from being honest. I wasn't allowed to have a bad day because I was a superhero. I wasn't allowed to be a three-dimensional character as a result of that. And so I thought about it, and I thought, how can I move forward? And the biggest thing that attracted me when I was an athlete was that it was about having a goal, making a statement about something that was bigger than me. See me go 70 miles an hour in one ski, it sort of forces you to look at somebody else in a wheelchair differently. So last year in September, we climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. 19,340-foot mountain, 3 degrees south of the equator, 5 different climate zones, snow on top, you start in a rainforest and you finish on a glacier. And the reason I felt like I had to climb there was because of the same reason I had to answer that little girl's question. 54 million people in this country with physical disabilities, 600 million in the world, yet they're invisible. That's 1 in 6 effectively, right? But it's an invisible group, so I thought I had to get to the top of the highest place I could find. I am about 30 feet from our camp at 17,500 feet at this point. 30 feet, and all I can imagine at this point is this is what it must feel like to drown within sight of shore. Because I am so physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted that I don't think I can make it 30 feet. Guys are walking back and forth, they're setting up tents. I'm like, I don't think I can get there. I don't think I can get to the back of the room here. The name of our organization is One Revolution. And One Revolution is because it's one turn of the crank. It's something little leading to something big. And for all of us, every single day there are things that go wrong. There are decisions that we have to make that determine the direction we're going to go. And each one of those is a revolution. Just that one revolution, and they build on each other. I eventually made it that 30 feet. Totally amazed me. I still had a whole lot more to climb. I still had 2,000 more feet to climb. And the idea was that I had to do it unassisted. I had to do it by myself in order to get recognized. In order for somebody to say, that is a worthwhile feat. Oops. We got to this point. It's a dormant volcano. This is on the crater rim. And I couldn't do it. So my team and the porters, they carried me for about 100 feet. 100 feet out of 13,000 feet. Yet to me, that was total failure. Complete failure. Because it meant that I hadn't done the whole thing unassisted. Now that you look at this vehicle, or you look at it in the other photo, it was an amazing vehicle. And that vehicle came out of the conversations that I had with my guide. He built that vehicle from those conversations, this thing that looks like a Mars rover. An amazing vehicle that can do so many things. He ran up and down the mountain, scouting it, trying to find the best trail. And I took him aside when we got into the crater rim, and I said, Dave, you disappointed me. You let me lie to all these people. You let me tell them I could do it unassisted, and you knew this was here. You knew I couldn't do it. He guides throughout the world, and he said, nobody climbs a mountain by themselves. Everybody does it as part of a team. Everybody has assistance. So I pedaled along and I got into the tent. Dave came in later and I said, you know what, you're right. Because what was the thing that I was trying to eliminate? I was trying to eliminate that sense of separation. That after my accident, I was worried about being uncool. I was worried about being separate. Well, if I did it by myself, if I didn't need anybody, then I was separate. I made my peace with it, but at the same time, when I reached the top, I was still worried about how the media would perceive it. This was supposed to be our start. We're doing a documentary film on this. We've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're still hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. We needed this as a victory to catapult us forward, to make us newsworthy. And so I'm worried about it. The guy standing next to me is a guy named Tajiri. And Tajiri had been a porter on the mountain. He was up 3 or 4 years ago. He was up early one morning carrying the gear, and there was a rock slide. And this rock slide killed 3 people asleep in their tents still. Literally ripped Tajiri's leg off of his body. First time I went to Africa, we met Tajiri. And my producer fell in love with his story. He said, this is great. We can have an African who's paralleling you, who's reconnecting with the story. It'll be so good for the film. And I thought, I don't think he can do it. Because he was wounded not just in body, but in soul. Like his spirit was damaged. And part of that is, in developing countries, they believe if you have a physical disability, it means that God is punishing you and your family. Kind of a hard name tag to overcome. But we bought Tajiri a new prosthesis, a leg that was a whole lot lighter, that fit a whole lot better. And the first day he came back to the mountain, he said to the other porters, he said, you never thought you'd see me here again. Well, I'm back. And he was. This guy who was a hollow shell of a guy was whole. I was worried about how the media might perceive what I had done, but we'd already helped one person. We'd helped one person who became famous as a result of being the first Tanzanian leg amputee to summit Kilimanjaro, who started affecting other people, who became a counter-argument to that idea that a physical disability means that God is punishing you and your family. So the lessons learned, always have to be lessons learned, right? The lessons learned from this are that you look at that group of Picasso and Einstein and all those guys who had a learning disability. They became successful. That maybe it was difficult. Lou Holtz once said, show me a successful person and I'll show you somebody who's dealt with adversity. We can learn from those people because they found something that they loved. They found a voice that changed the way that we saw the world. Part of it is we've got to risk something. After my accident, a group, an off-Broadway company came up to this rehab place where I was learning to use a wheelchair, and this guy said, well, you should audition for a play. And I thought, I'm an athlete. What are my athlete friends going to think about me auditioning for a play? What do you want to do? Why do you want to audition for this? But the guy said, just read for it. I ended up getting cast as the lead in that play. I ended up acting professionally. I was on a soap opera for a while. I've been in commercials. I found a talent that I had no idea that I had. Partially because I risked going out of my comfort zone. That I did something I never thought I could do. The other part, as we said on the mountain, is doing something small can lead to something big. That each revolution leads to something bigger. Each day we make decisions that affect where we're going to end up. That's a revolution. The other part is we don't do it alone. It's all about that support. And it's about creating that support, creating those anchors, creating those people that you can go to when something does happen, that you know how that they help you get through what's going on, because we don't do it ourselves. And the other part is having a goal that's bigger than you yourself. That mountain for me, the first day I got into my vehicle, I was still on the pavement, hadn't even started anything, and I was in first gear, and I thought, I am in big trouble because I do not have a low enough gear. When we got up to the top, it got so much steeper, and I kept just clicking this thing over. And part of it, I think I was riding on the power of those 600 million people. That it wasn't about me getting to the summit. It was about me getting to the summit so that I could leverage it, so that I could find a voice for these other people. Can I get 3 people to raise their hands, hopefully, and tell me what you think my name tags are now? See, all right. Revolutionary, I like it, I like it, okay. Teacher, educator, great. Inspirational, cool. And that's, I think that's exactly what we're talking about. And I think inspirational gets to one of the main parts of what we're doing. The only reason I've been able to do this project, that I've had people come to me for this project, is that I am what Donna called a quality individual, which is kind of a weird name tag for me to give myself, but at the same time, it's allowed me to do what I've done. It's been by virtue of treating people well, by virtue of making sure that I'm looking out for their well-being, that they trust me. And I think that that's a big part of what we're trying to do in that that one revolution, is the idea of how can we maintain that sense of being a quality individual. And that happens absolutely every day. So think about it now. Later on today, I want you to go home and think about, what are the 3 ways that you want people to see you? What would be your 3 name tags? You have a whole lot more power than you think. And if people don't see that Michael Phelps in you right now, how can you find a way to get them to see that Michael Phelps in you? So this one, we're going to do it all together, okay? So ready? So 1, 2, 3.
It's not what happens to you. It's what you do with what happens to you.
Cool. Thank you. One more thing. Oh, one more thing. Yeah. And the other part of it is that how can we create a community in which we can develop our unique voice, in which we can find our Michael Phelps, in which we can help other people do exactly that. So here's our website if you want. I don't think, do we have time for questions or not? We don't.
I'm going to ask people who can stay to stay.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.
Come on down, meet Chris. If you have a question, you got some free time.